Hello and welcome to the Innovation Women Speak webinar series. My name is Bobby Carlton and I'm the founder of Innovation Women. If you're not familiar with Innovation Women, we're a visibility bureau for entrepreneurial, technical, and professional women. We connect women with speaking opportunities and we connect event managers with awesome speakers who just happen to be women. Our mission is to eliminate what we see as the all-male, all-pale, all-stale panels you see at so many of the industry conferences. We're really a one-stop shop for event managers. Innovation Women is much more than a traditional speakers bureau. Event managers can search our online database all by themselves. They can do that for free, and a speaker pays only $100 a year to become a member. We recently rolled out a number of new features, so event managers can post their calls for speakers directly on the platform, and speakers can search for and apply for postings. If you'd like on innovation for our newsletter, you can do that through our bit.ly link here, or text INNO to 22828. Before we get to today's presentation, just a quick promotion for next week's webinar. Amanda Nielsen will be talking about how your product is your best salesperson. Amanda is a demand generation marketer and strategic partnerships manager at New Breed. She's a rising thought leader in the B2B SaaS community, and she's eager to share her experience, empower her peers, and use her passions for marketing, diversity, and innovation to positively impact others. So today's presentation is from Cathy McNally. Cathy is the founder and CEO of Women Speak Up. She's been making people laugh and helping them learn, usually at the same time, for nearly 20 years. She's bringing her background as a comic and her expertise in powerful communication to create fun, interactive, and highly effective workshops, coaching, and keynotes. So before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. This is an annotated version of your screen. Below the video viewing window, there are tabs. The default tab is Ask a Question. You can type in a question or a comment at any point during the program. There's also a tab called Rate This, which helps us determine what you like. We read all the feedback, so feel free to let us know. You can also enlarge your screen to view it in full screen mode, and at any time if you need audio help, feel free to click on the Help button at the bottom of the screen. So now on to today's presentation. Take it away, Cathy.
Thanks so much, Bobby. Hey, everybody. I'm delighted to be here with Innovation Women. I've been part of the group for a few years now and really love it. So I'm going to start off and say that this is a very weird format because I'm just talking and you're all listening. So I hope that you will use the questions from the audience, feedback from the audience, and if I say something you don't really have a question but you're thinking, what the heck is she talking about? Just write that. So consider this a dialogue, and I will love to hear what you say. So my business is really helping people be sticky, and that's what we're going to talk about. And I'd like to offer a free session today to some of the women who sign up. So if you're one of the first women who sign up with me at the end of the session, you will get a free 30-minute consultation on the stickiness of your presentation, and I'll say more. And everybody who sends me an email after this session will get a copy of my slides. So let's begin. So my job is to help people make their message sticky. So I'm going to use glue as my metaphor, and here's lots of glue. And as we all know, if you're a gluing fanatic like me, there's lots of different glues that you need for different purposes. Some you use paper glue, wood glue, etc. So we're going to talk kinds of make things stick with your audience. And when I say stick with your audience, what do I mean? I mean that your audience will have a hard time forgetting what you say. So you know that expression, people see something kind of weird and they say, well, I can't unsee that. Well, I want that to work for you, but in a really positive way. I just want people to say, well, I can't forget what that speaker said about this. So how do you do it, though? Well, first I want to ask, what do people remember from your talk? If you were to question people, say an hour later, send them a survey and ask them, what did you remember? What would they say? Would they say, well, her dress was nice, we had salmon for lunch, it was good, I think. So I have been working with speakers and with apps, and my specialty has always been creating and designing and presentations that help people remember something. And that is not something that we normally and routinely plan on. What do I want my audience to remember? That's what we're going to talk about today. So there's two kinds of presenters and speakers in this world. We're going to look at the first kind first. And I have to say that many of us fall into the category of informer. And some of the characteristics of being an informer are you feel like a human textbook. You have so much to say. And it's true. All of you listening to me today are experts in at least 12 or 15 things, and you have a lot to say. Pardon me. The second sign of an informer is if you have ever caught yourself saying, oh, I've got a lot of material to cover, everybody, so let's get started. That is a signal to you that you may not have a message-driven presentation. You have the informer human textbook approach. Another sign of an informer is that there's no flow to your talk or presentation. It's just one darn topic after another. This is not true as much in regular talks, but with people who are presenting with PowerPoint, if you look at their agenda, it's actually useless because it has no real flow and it's just a list of topics. And then the last sign is a boring progression of abstract information. And when I say abstract information, and I'm going to refer to that a lot, I mean that you're talking in a way that people cannot make pictures in their brain of what you're talking about. And that's going to be a really important concept for this whole idea of stickiness, because many of us, this is especially true in the nonprofit world, in the academic world, are very interested in ideas. Unfortunately, ideas without images or examples behind them are completely unsticky. They're that Elmer's glue that you took out, that there is no stick left in that glue. It is all dried up. But let's look at the second kind of presenter. And then I'm going to ask you in the to give me feedback about which one you are. You could just write in informer or transformer. So a transformer is a different kind of presenter, and that's someone who doesn't feel they have so much to say as much as I have got to change these people. Now don't worry, I'm not talking about you have to completely transform the audience, get them to eat something or believe something. I don't mean that. I mean, I've got to change these people so that at the end of this talk or presentation, they think in a different way about one particular topic. They may do the action I want them to do, and they feel in a certain way. So instead of conveying a lot of content, you actually have messages, and the messages are connected to the change you want in that audience. So even today, I want to change. I want to see if I can get a change in you all, and we can talk about that after. I don't want to just convey a lot of material, although I do have a lot of material I want to share with you, a lot of messages. Another sign of a transformer is a flow to that presentation so that it actually is engaging to the audience how you arrange your topic. And then the final element is content that's sticky. So even if you're using abstract ideas, lots of concepts, you still make it sticky. And this is what we're going to focus on today. All of these elements are great in this transformer list, but we're going to focus on what audiences tend to remember. And this comes from research, from my experience. I've been inspired by a book called Made to Stick by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. And that book is about what tends to stick with people. My take on it is a little bit different, but I highly recommend that. So if you could tell me, and maybe Bobby, you can tell them where to write this in, which thing are they, informer or transformer? Where would they write that, Bobby?
So there's an opportunity, as we went over during the introduction, to put things into the comments or questions at any time.
Oh, great. Okay. So let's hear that. What do you say? Who is a transformer and who is an informer? And we'll give you some time to think about that. So how to create a sticky talk? Here's the elements that are going to help you begin. You need to know what you need from the audience. Transformer, great. You need to know what you need from the audience. That's number one. And you need to know what they need. So it's what you need for them and what they need from you. The second thing is it's hard emotionally. Oh, we've got half and half. Transformers, half informers. Oh, great. Thank you. You need to accept the heartbreaking reality that the attention span of most listeners is tiny. Think of them as hummingbirds that want to just go to your flower for just a few seconds, get what they can, and then go out to lunch, right? So, and then you need to commit to using elements that are the most sticky and engaging to the human brain. Wow, an informer transforming into a transformer. Trying to be a transformer. I'm going to promise you that you are going to have the tools you need when we finish this presentation. Okay, so here's the first step. And you cannot ever create a talk or a presentation or basically any important communication without knowing the answer to this question. What do I need my audience to know, to feel, to do, and then most importantly, to take away? So that means at the end of this talk, you are really focused on that end result, what happens with that audience. What do they know that they didn't know? How do they feel? And we often ignore that, and it's an extremely essential part of presentations because audiences don't always need to do something, but they always need to know and feel something. And finally, what do they need to take away? And by that I mean, what's the message that your audience must remember? I call that the top takeaway. And usually it's something like this. Okay, so I should do X to get Y. So I noticed that next week's webinar is about your product is your best marketing or sales help. So that presenter is probably going to share with you some great tips about using your product to help with your sales. She's going to suggest that you do something with your product and talking about it to get a good result. So we often want to think about it that way. If we want to get somebody to do something, we need to think, what do we want them to do and why should they do that? Then we have to think about, what does my audience need? And this can be painful because we usually just like to think about us. So let's look at a few audience things. Here we got somebody might want leadership advice. Someone might need to find out what works, best practices. Somebody might need marketing tips. Somebody might want to know if they're on the right path, and they're on the far right. Somebody's just there for the snacks because, you know, we're human. So you need to know, and often one way to think about that is to imagine the reader's question. If you can imagine the reader's questions, then you can begin to see how will you figure out what is the sweet spot. And I have a name for that sweet spot, and I call it the win-win. So here we say what I need, that's W-I-N. What you need, that's my listener. And in the middle is the your talk. That's where you should focus. Not on the place that what the audience needs that you can't help them with, and not on the stuff that you want to talk about that they don't care about. You want to focus on that sweet spot. And I know the proper name for this is Venn diagram, but I call it my Zen diagram because I think that it really helps to make a Zen talk when you focus on what the audience needs and what you need. And then it's a win-win. All right, let's move on to stickiness. So here we are, make it sticky. And for me, stickiness, I've made stickiness into an acronym that really encompasses all the stuff that stays with audiences. So you can see that S, surprising, and I'll go through these all. T is for tense. So if you make your talk surprising, it will be sticky. If you make it tense, and I'll tell you exactly what I mean, it will be sticky. If you make it identifiable, meaning that the audience can identify with you, it will stick with them. If you make it cinematic, and this is one of the most important things, meaning that they can see and hear what you were talking about in their mind's eye. Finally, KISS, keep it simple and specific, and I hate to say stupid because you're not stupid, but you know the saying. And then you-centric, totally focused on the needs of the audience. So as you can see, sticky has S-T-I-C-K-Y. That's a lot of concepts. I am going to go through them. I know that you are going to be thinking about what you can do. I would just tell yourself, if you were a listener, hey, I'm going to focus on what reaches out to me of these, and then I'm going to write to Cathy and get these slides so that I can see and go through again. And listen to this. This will be recorded so you can listen to it again also. So let's talk about surprising. Audiences love surprises. Tell us something we don't know. You can recall TED Talks that you've heard or other talks that you've heard, and when you hear something surprising, you tend to really hold on to that because your brain gets a little bit of a charge because something different is happening. It's not information that you know. So I'm going to show you one example of this, and this is, and I got a glue-related fact. 1 square inch of super glue can hold 1 ton of weight. And this car is about 1 ton. I did go to find a car that was about a ton. So imagine spreading a piece of glue on wood, I guess, or something, and then it being able to hold up that car. So we call that sort of thing a startling statistic. And startling statistics are amazing for catching people's attention. And that means you say, did you know that 1 out of every 10 people in your neighborhood does not have internet or does not know how to read? Another way of doing a startling statistic is to compare it to something else. So if I say 1,000 people in your town cannot read, okay, that's a big number, and you wonder, geez, is that a lot or not? But what if I say 10 people in your block, your city block, cannot read? Then you have a different sort of vision of that, and you do have a vision. You can imagine it. So try to get something startling into your presentation. The second thing, and this is what most of us do not want to do, you need to let us feel the pain about what you're talking about. Make it tense for a little bit. So if you have a situation in which you're talking about a problem that needs to be solved, you need to let us feel that problem. And I have noticed that the speakers I have worked with for years, and I'm not sure if women are even more likely to do this, they tend to have this impulse to take care of this audience, take care of this, not make the audience worry, like to say, I'm going to tell you about a family that came to our social service organization, and they were hungry. They were living in a car. But we found them a room in a hotel, we got them hooked up with a job, etc. Well, that is not enough to make us engage with the story. There is a famous writer, and I can't remember who it is, who said you need to paint the nightmare and paint the dream. So it means that we feel the hurting, we feel the problem, and then we're much more engaged with feeling the solution. So don't help us solve the problem and say everything worked out. Make us sweat a little bit and worry about that lost cat. The third one is to be identifiable. And this picture is a funny picture of someone sort of showing their vulnerability with the stuff from the donut there. You need to connect with the audience so that they do not see you as a sort of information generating machine. So everyone will do that differently, and you don't have to necessarily be extremely vulnerable. You don't have to talk about all your faults, but you should connect with them with some authenticity. That's a word that's overused a lot, sincerity. Share a little bit of yourself. Now I'm going to share a little bit of myself just for humor's sake, and beware, this is shocking, but maybe you don't want to go this far with vulnerability. So what the heck is this? Well, in addition to me being a coach and a speaker and a trainer, I'm also a stand-up comic. And I have been doing a series of comedy shows about these crazy shapers that are always on Facebook and how ridiculous they are. So I've made myself a shaper out of duct tape, and this time I made myself a shaper out of saran wrap, and it was just as ridiculous as it looked, but it was really funny. So you want to be careful about what you show to an audience. Like, of course, I wouldn't do this with the, leadership team at Visa, but I did it at a comedy shop. You want to be careful about what you show, but don't think that you have to show yourself to be perfect and invulnerable. The third thing is, and this is really, I believe, the most important thing, and it's the way that most speakers totally can get better. This is where there's so much room for improvement. Be cinematic. That means let your audience see what you are saying. So many of us are really into concepts. In presentations, people tend to avoid verbs, which is really weird because when a reader or a listener hears a verb or when a reader sees a verb, what happens is they make a picture of that verb in their mind. When they make a picture of what you are saying, they can take it in and remember it. So I can't stress this strongly enough. I'm going to show you just one quick example here. Oh, I just found this picture. I thought it was beautiful. Make word picture. So if you can see this beautiful little girl here blowing bubbles, and they're turning into objects. That's what you need to do. Think in terms of pictures, even if you have concepts. Try to think of pictures. Always use examples. And here's an example. So someone might say, an adhesive material. Well, what do you think of when you hear adhesive material? It's really hard to think of anything specific. But if I say glue, you get a picture. And it's probably this, although it might be your favorite personal glue. We all have one. And so you want to be really careful about that, about being concrete. And then finally, know exactly what you want to say when they leave and make it simple and specific. So we'll say, keep it simple and specific. that means that it's not too much. So one of the reasons I have an acronym with sticky is, you can probably guess, there's a lot of ways to make stuff sticky. There's a lot of concepts here that I'm talking about, and I know that you could forget them, and you probably will forget many of them. But I want you to remember to keep things sticky, and I'm hanging it on that and making it specific rather than saying, well, there's just 15 concepts that you have to remember. You know, when lawyers are presenting to a jury to get them to believe that the client is innocent, or a prosecutor get them to believe that the client is guilty, they don't say there's 9 reasons to support this verdict. No, they just say there's 1 reason. Yeah, they've talked about a lot of stuff. The lawyer has gone on a lot of stuff, but they hang it on 1 simple reason, evidence. My client could not have been there at 9 p.m. It doesn't mean that that's all the jury will think about, but it's their initial and most important thought. So you need to do that too. We talked about, what do we want the audience to say when they leave? That means that you imagine someone leaving this, which I have imagined, one of you all listening, which I'm so grateful for, listening to this talk, and then you leave and somebody says, your friend, another innovation woman says, oh, I couldn't be at that webinar. What did she talk about? I want you to say a certain thing. And I don't want you to say, oh, we learned a lot of concepts. I want it to be very specific. And I'll tell you about it later. So I want you to look at these, and here you can respond to this question. And the question is, which of these quotes is stickier? Now, we've just talked about making pictures. So there's the one on the left. I guess you could say left is my officials are monitoring this situation very closely, and I can promise that we shall take blah, blah, blah. That's the left. And then the right is the John F. Kennedy. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before the decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. So which one, you just write it in, is easier to remember, the right or the left? And as we look at them, we think about, if we look at the corporate communications, what can we picture in this statement that begins, my officials are monitoring? What do we see when we read that? Right, so people are coming in and they're saying the one on the right, John F. Kennedy. Absolutely. And if you know why that is, you can write it in. I would love to hear from you. What do you think? JFK, right side is more specific. Absolutely. And I hope that, yes, right. I hope that you notice why it's stickier. It's stickier because we see a man landing on the moon. Landing on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. That is a huge picture, which is very attractive to us as audience members, and the safely to Earth. Also, he says, before the decade is out. So, right, and somebody says blah, blah, blah on the left. So with the right, we can make at least 1, maybe 2 powerful pictures. On the left, we have nothing to hang on. It's a little bit like, reminds me of when you're reading a textbook or a professional journal, and you read the page and you say, oh my gosh, I just read that page, and now I don't remember it. I'm going to read it again, and this time I am going to really try to pay attention, right? And then you try again. It's not your fault. It's the textbook writer's fault. And the final one is to be you-focused. So remember way back when we talked about what I need and what you need. You really need to focus on what you need. And I'll go a little bit more into detail here. about the suggestion that I made before when we were talking about this. When you're thinking about your audience, so say I'm thinking about my audience before I did this webinar or other webinar presenters, or all of you do talk. Think about your audience to list their needs. Why would they be coming to your talk? What do they care about? What keeps them up at night? What do they want in relation to your talk? So if I'm thinking about the great topic next week, use your product as your best sales tool, I might think my questions would be, how can I make more money? How do I do that? What if I'm worried about my product? So for you, and for what I did when you're a presenter, you want to list on paper or on the laptop all those questions and needs and look at them. Of course, if you can actually talk to people that are going to be in your audience beforehand, that is so fantastic because it really gives you, audience true knowledge. So if you can meet with some of these people and find out what they want, you can help your talk to them. But you have to write it down. And then one thing that I do is really group those needs, look at those needs in a group, see which are more important. What do you need to deal with? And make sure you deal with them. Or if you don't deal with them, if you can't help someone with something, like there's things I can't talk about today, then I need to explain to the audience, I'm going to focus on this and not that. So I am finished with my stickiness presentation, and I wanted to leave lots of time for questions from the audience. But first, I want to give you a reminder. This is what we talked about. To make it sticky, you want to make it surprising. You want to make it tense at some points, not your whole talk. You want to make it identifiable. You want to make it cinematic. You want to make it simple and specific, and you want to make it you-centric. Now, I realized just now when I'm talking that I don't think I made enough tension in this talk. So let's see, maybe I should have said at the beginning, if you don't do what I say, you are in danger of losing your career as a speaker. That would be a little bit too much. But yes, I could have added a little bit more tension. So let's hear questions. I think there are some questions from the audience. What do you want to hear more about?
So we do have a number of questions.
Okay, great.
The first one is actually about the stats and lists, the startling statistics, and where do you get those numbers from? So somebody's looking for a good, reliable source of statistics.
Oh, so here's what I do. There used to be I guess, a great web source for people who wanted to make metaphors and analogies. But here's what I do. If I have a number, I would Google, say I want to talk about 10,000 people. Then I will Google 10,000 people, population of, and I will find that. I will find, well, this is like the population of Greenland or something like that. So I do put in numbers in Google. I do look for population of, but I don't know of any, and other people might know of great ways to get more custom-made solutions, but I just fool around with numbers like that. Just Google them.
Gotcha. So our next question is a comment and a question. So someone is saying they recently co-led a webinar on the topic of community engagement beyond the buzz. Her section or his section was called Making It Stick, and the slides, a lot of pictures around stickiness, post-it notes, gecko toes, glue. Is that too cerebral?
I don't know what's cerebral about those things because they're all sticky, right? We can see them. So I think that they're great. I wish I had thought of gecko toes. That's awesome.
So Audiences all different. Are there some people that just want the facts?
Audiences are different, but there are no audiences that like an unengaging presentation. Now, I'm sure that, I know that's not exactly what you mean. But yes, people have different needs for information. People are not similar. But I know that you can make things sticky and give those numbers people their absolute numbers. I don't think that gets in the way of this. I don't think anybody would ever say this presentation is too engaging or this presentation is giving me too many images. Well, I suppose you can. I mean, you can screw it up. You can see that, okay, I want to get to the point, Mary, so stop giving me all these images, etc. So you'd never use anything that was not appropriate. Your main job is, like we talked about, getting them to believe and say and do and feel what you want them to feel.
Can you provide some more examples for how to use questions during your presentation?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Right. I meant to say more about that. So here's some a secret treasure. Using audience questions is the most powerful way of getting audience interaction. So here's what I mean. If you have done a kind of inventory of your audience, you've imagined what they need, and you can imagine what their questions are, and then you use them exactly as your audience might say them, your audience is so connected to you. So here's an example. What if I'm talking to you about life insurance, and I want to sell you life insurance, and I know that your questions are, is it really worth it? How much does it cost per month? Can I get it cheaper elsewhere? And I ask those questions. Like I say, you're probably wondering, can I get it? You're probably thinking, I can get this cheaper elsewhere, can't I? Or do I really need it? As soon as I have put your questions in my mouth or on my slides, you are totally you're totally connected with me, because I have shown that I am truly listening to you. And I'm going to ask your question, and then I'm going to answer it. Questions also make excellent slide titles and excellent presentation titles and excellent agenda items. I would use questions 100% more than you are using them in your writing, in your marketing materials, in your slides, and in your talk. Audiences love to hear their question. Another thing about questions is that when we all as humans hear a question, we must hear the answer, even though we may not care about it that much. Questions we don't like to have unanswered, so we stick around for the answer, which is why questions as an agenda format, to put it all in questions rather than just lists of topics, is so engaging to audiences.
Our next question is, can you speak more about making an audience tense? Are you asking us to shock or grab attention with purpose? How much is too much?
Right. Yeah. No, I'm not asking you to shock that unless, that's appropriate for your answer. I'm asking you to allow your audience, if you're talking about a problem, if you're talking about a state that you want to fix, which is what most presentations are doing. Certainly most of these webinars are doing. Many of us do that in our work, talking about a problem. And I work a lot with leaders and nonprofits. You want to allow the audience to feel a little pain or tension or worry about what you're talking about for a little bit. This is why when we think of the world of literature and stories, when we tell stories, when we tell the story of Hansel and Gretel, we do not say Hansel and Gretel were abandoned by their parents in the forest and they went to a witch's house, but it all ended up fine at the end, so don't worry. We don't do that, right? We pull our readers in to be with us and worry about Hansel and Gretel. And in presentations, if we're talking about a problem and solution, we tend to not linger on the problem. We want to solve it for the audience. We want to sort of say, but don't worry, it's going to be okay. And that may, when I say make it tense or let them worry, that may be just for 5 minutes. I mean, it really depends. But let them at some point feel the pain of whatever problem you're talking about and want to.
Okay. I think a lot of people know that humor makes presentations more memorable. But does it make it more memorable for the funny aspects, or does it make it more memorable for the message that you're trying to convey?
Well, here's a couple of things about that. It definitely makes it more memorable for the funny part, right? You'll remember that, but you may not remember any point about that. But the thing about humor in the brain is when we laugh, right after we laugh, we are more receptive and attentive. So whatever you say after the audience laughs, they will listen to more. So that is a way of connecting a message to a bit of laughter. I mean, if you can combine them both, the laughter and the message in one line, funny line that also sends a message, that's fantastic. That's super sticky. But if you just make a joke and then you say something that's a message you want to convey, that's really powerful because the brain is so open. Attention increases if we look at brain waves after humor.
Earlier. Could you give us the title again, please?
Yeah, I'll give you the title. It's called Made to Stick, M-A-D-E, to stick. And it is written by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. I'm just going to go back here. Chip Heath and Dan Heath. And they are both marketing professors or professionals. And they've written several books about great topics. They're really great. And the book is hilarious. And it's similar to what I'm saying. It just goes at it a different way. And their book has been so inspiring to me. So I highly recommend it.
How can we come up with good analogies and metaphors for our presentations?
So I once had a person say to me in a workshop, financial consultant say, I can't think of metaphors. I keep running into roadblocks. So, of course, she had a metaphor in roadblocks. We do it all the time. So how you can do it is to do a little mental playing with it. You have to do some brainstorming. What is this like? Especially knowing the interests of your audience. So in the business world, sports metaphors are huge because it's, a lot of guys in the business world. They don't always work internationally. So you have to think, is it gardening? Is it farming? Is it Disney? Is it popular culture? What is like this situation? And at first it does feel hard to people like the lady who said, I keep running into roadblocks, but we do it so naturally. So you just have to set aside some time and brainstorm about it.
Okay. What if I don't feel creative? How can anyone use these presentation techniques if they're not feeling the creative burst at that particular moment?
Great question. Right. So is creativity necessary? If you want to take this to an extreme degree, yes. But let's look at some things that you don't need to be so creative about. Being cinematic. So that doesn't mean you have to be like a movie director, that creative. All you have to do is to create images and examples so your audience knows what you're talking about. So if we are talking about a particular candidate and they say, I work a lot with candidates, and they say, I believe we should have, we should all have freedom of opportunity. And everyone says, yeah, that's right. But really, what the heck is freedom of opportunity? But then great politicians and candidates will say, What do I mean? And Barack Obama did this beautifully. What do I mean? It means that Helen, who's living in a trailer park in Northern Virginia, can get a job even though she doesn't have a car. So I don't think you have to be like a super genius to create images, and I would work on that first. But don't be intimidated by thinking you have to be creative to be sticky. You really don't.
So one of the questions we have is, how do I know when I've reached the transformer stage?
Well, that is a really great question. I think you will know because you will be looking in a new way to evaluate your talk. So you will be wanting to find out not just the nice things that people say, but when you're going to listen for certain things. Like if people tell you, you changed my thinking about something, or I'm going to do something differently now, or I didn't know that and it makes such a big difference. So you are actually going to be looking for transformation and not for, geez, you took in all my ideas. So you're going to start evaluating that differently.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people talk about TED and TEDx as their tagline is ideas worth shaping. But really, the goal of a TED Talk is to get the audience to do something.
Yes, absolutely. And it's that focus on doing, Bobby, that we tend to leave. We tend not to think about or envision. What exactly do we want them to do? And I can tell you, I've worked with hundreds or thousands of speakers and presenters, and thinking in terms of think, believe, feel, and do has been transformative to them. It also makes presentations way easier when you go in with a goal rather than when you go in with lots of content to deliver.
Actually, speaking of speakers that you've worked with, one of our questions here is looking for a short sample presentation demonstrating the concepts you've talked about. Are there examples that you would point to?
Well, there are. I don't have examples because every presentation is different, right? And people are always looking for that one-size-fits-all perfect presentation. But where you can find a lot of good presentations, and especially presentations on presentations, is at slideshare.com. So if you go to slideshare.com, you can see a lot of presentations. And presentations is a whole big other subject. You had a great webinar on that a few weeks ago from my fellow member in the state who does great work on presentations. But yeah, it's hard to say about what would be good for you, for everybody.
So we're coming to the end of the questions. If there's one or two more, we might have a minute or two left to do that. But meanwhile, Cathy made a little offer here. If you want the first 10 people to email her, you can get a 30-minute phone coaching session, and her email is there. And also, if you are interested in signing up for the Innovation Women newsletter, you can text us to get on that list, or you can sign up at innovationwomen.com. And if you're interested in joining Innovation Women as a speaker, you can use the promo code IWWebinar. That's all in caps until midnight tonight for 20% off your membership. And again, here is Cathy's email if you want to be one of the first 10 people to email her to get a free 30-minute phone coaching session. And we'll also be sending out later on the link to this webinar. And at the end, we'll also be sending out, pushing out the link to sign up for next week's webinar.
So speaking of stickiness and slides, I see that somehow I put my email address in the most unsticky way because you can barely read it. So it is Cathy, C-A-T-H-Y, at womenspeakup.org.
Great. Thank you so much. All righty. So that we are going to be closing up the Innovation Women Speaks webinar for today. Thank you so much, Cathy McNally, for joining us and helping us to make our own messages stickier and making our messages stick. So join us next week for more of the Innovation Women speakers on the Innovation Women Speak webinar series. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.